Ladies and gentlemen, this is internet personality Vangelus, and in December of 2014, the Mecha Zone store dropped 30 bags of bots, a stocking stuffer style item that delivered 4 3D printed robot action figures per Ziploc bag, all designed from the ground up by David White. This ran for 30 bucks at the time, and while none of the figures have the Mecha Zone acetone vapor finish that we've seen before, they are fully cleaned and assembled pieces that came ready for playtime. Bounty Hunter was printed in blue ABS and has a battle-ready bipedal mech aesthetic. The head looks like a hell of cockpit, and there are shin-mounted launchers and shoulder-mounted railgun laser rifle things. There's also a Mecha Zone trademark design worked into the back. Keep an eye out for that on the other bag of bots as well. Rocking some green ABS, Master Blaster is the thicker, chunkier, heavier sibling silhouette to Bounty Hunter's sleeker chassis. Running in the same fields as Destroids and Mech Warrior machines, this robot lives up to its name, with cannons on its hands and a third cannon for a hat. The center mass cockpit and digitigrade legs end in gigantic chicken boots that get across a sense of weight on this micro monster. Speaking of designs that remind me of Mech Warrior, the purple ABS of Scimitar rendered a straight-up chicken-walking cockpit with a laser for a nose and missile racks for ears. This is the slightest of the 4 Bagabot bots, but I feel that details like the knee joint struts and pistons showcase another end of the range of detail that David White was able to get out of his Affinia printers. And that brings us to Affinitron, the orange ABS bipedal robot that seems to be named after the machine of its birth. Affinitron appears to be unarmed and has the most humanoid head design, giving me the impression of a more scientifically oriented mech, if not an unassuming one bearing some sort of otherworldly power. I expected posability on these guys in the form of like the ball joints on their shoulders and hips, and that's about it. Bounty Hunter here's the first one we're going to look at to see just how much more posability there actually was on one of these little dudes. So he does have a ball socket joint for his shoulders. It goes out about that far, forwards and backwards happily. A little bit of this kind of tiltage with the hips. He can kick, he can mule kick, can go about that far out, and you also get a little bit of this wiggle tilt, which is real helpful. It's like a soft thigh swivel in a way. But there's also a cut waist joint. There's a cut neck joint. There are cut joints on his big shoulder cannons, and there are ball-socketed ankles so that he can stay flat-footed. There are no elbows and knees. I wasn't expecting them, but this extra bit of posability here, like, there's a lot more life to this figure than I first expected. It would be cool if there was like a DX version of these someday, where perhaps there were elbows and knees and a little bit of paint for an extra 10 bucks or something like that. But as it is, like, as a raw printed piece, this is real cool to see the potential of like just a 3D printed figure, no bells and whistles. Going over to Master Blaster, he's also got ball socket shoulders and hips. Not quite as much range outwards due to the design of his arms, but he can, you know, pump his arms up and down, and his hips go about that far wide. They can walk. He's got ball socket ankles, deep set within the design of these huge feet, which I think looks really cool when they're tilted like this. And then he's also got a cut waist and a cut quote-unquote neck joint for his gun hat. The Scimitar has got ball socket hips and ankles, and that's about it. There's also cut joints on the missile launchers, so you can keep them aligned when turning them around or go for like full spread. But even on a figure like this, where it's like, you know, hard sculpted digitigrade legs, the ball socket ankles especially do a lot for this little dude to have some personality when he's doing stuff, you know, like standing at attention or going to action or like running or shooting. Like, for something that's raw printed like this, I think that's super cool. And the Affinitron has got ball socket shoulders, which almost have like the extra cut up here to go like the full 90 out. I don't know if that's just a limitation of the materials, but they are just like on the other two dudes who have arms. His legs are a bit limited going out due to the design of the stuff on his hips. But he can kick. He's got ball socket ankles with just enough tilt range for stuff like this. And there's also a cut waist and a cut neck. So, like, they're posable, all things considered. And then this might be a byproduct of just the way they were designed. All of the cut joints are actually just peg connections. And these peg connections mean that you can do a little bit of part swapping, at least, you know, among the ones that have pegged on bits and pieces. So, you know, if I bust them down, and I don't think this is affecting the stiffness of the joints. I do know for the ball socket joints, the way that David White does them I'm not sure if without the acetone treatment this is still the case, but I believe that they are ball socket joints you don't really want to pop apart if you can avoid it. But you can custom build a couple of dudes here with just, I don't know, here's a 2-cockpit mecha thing. Just custom building these things through the small amount of options that you have, regardless, is still pretty fun. And, you know, things like these extra gun bits, like if you take this, the bounty hunter torso here, and it's like, hey, I don't want the sniper rifles, I want missile launchers. In the context of the bag of bots, it's kind of possible. And I think that's super fun. I'll give them a head, too. As for size, I mean, these guys are less than 3 inches tall. They're, like, just shy of 3 inches tall for the most part. In terms of Transformers size scale stuff, because people tend to think like that, you know, they're smaller than a Generations Legend, but they are definitely bulky compared to a Cyberverse Legion toy. There's one thing I should probably check, just so we are all on the same page. The pegs are, like, almost 5mm, but not quite 5mm enough to work, at least in Swerve's hands. If you do a little bit of thickening on the pegs, I'm sure you could get these to work as, like, guns for other toys as well, but maybe that's pushing the functionality demands a little bit too far. Even the fit in between these guys, some of these end up fitting a bit looser than, like, the waists, so the upside is, if any of this stuff does get loose, it's all very tweakable. Like, you could just go in there with some floor polish or your thickener of choice and just beef up the connections a little bit. But these little things, like my expectations were much lower than what came out, considering just the nature of what these are. So it's just a lot of fun. Their surfaces bear the crosshatched texture of freshly printed ABS plastic, but the Bag-O-Bot foursome are a surprisingly playable quartet of pocket-sized, stocking stuffable toy robots. The solid build quality was something I expected, regardless of the lack of acetone vapor treatment, but the level of posability across the board was the last thing I expected. And the key quality that skyrockets the value proposition of this set. Remember, these are designed, produced, and finished by a one-man operation. The bang for your buck is kinda incredible at $30 a bag. I hope they can keep popping back into the MechaZone shop in the future. Anyway, this has been Internet Personality Vangelus, and if you've got a 3D printer of your own, the Bag-O-Bots figures are also up on pinshape.com. I don't have a 3D printer, so I have no idea how any of that works firsthand, but share your thoughts in the comments section if you gave it a shot yourself. One of these days I'll get a 3D printer. Just for me, it feels like the kind of purchase I'd make when I'm the right combination of too tired and too drunk and too emotional and irrational. I mean, I guess I could listen to Black Star like 50 times in a row, I don't know.